Hello, this story happened to my husband years ago when he joined a gaming group at a local gaming store. His character was a dwarf, and he told the DM that unless he said otherwise, his character was only speaking in Dwarven. The DM told him that was not acceptable and that he had to say the words, "I am speaking in Dwarven," before every single sentence he spoke. My husband wrote a note with those words on it and held it up every time he spoke in character, and the DM kept glaring at him but did not say anything else about it. They were in a dungeon, and my husband was playing the rogue. He had to describe exactly where he was searching for traps each and every time he rolled. Like he had to roll separately for the floor, the walls, the ceiling, things like that. The one time he didn't mention a specific surface in the 5-hour game, the DM, of course, had a trap on the surface he did not check. During another session, there was a body of a bad guy up in a loft. My husband went up into the loft and said he was going to search the body. The DM had him roll, and he rolled really well. I think it was a 19 on the die. The DM said he did not find anything, so he threw the body down to the ground. The DM said, "Okay, you hear a crash, like breaking glass." My husband investigated and was told that a potion bottle had broken. He said, "But I searched the body." And the DM's response was, "Well, you didn't say you were searching the pockets." So apparently when my husband said he was searching the body, the DM thought he meant like a cavity body search, and apparently not searching the clothing on the body in any way. Has anyone else had a similar experience? If so, how did you handle it? Can't say I've ever dealt with a DM who needed you to be painfully specific anytime you wanted to do any flavor or do anything in general. Honestly, the way I would handle it, either talk to the DM into getting him to quit or quit the group entirely, because this just sounds like a pain in general. Hello, first time poster here. I found this sub a little over a week ago and I finally worked up the courage to share one of my stories. Not sure if this one 100% counts because technically the player never made it past session 0. Obligatory mobile apologies. TLDR, player comes up with an awesome character concept, refuses to give them any incentive to join the party. I tell him to roll a new character and he decides he'd just rather not play. Disclaimer, this one is much milder than a lot of what gets posted here. I've been DMing for the better part of 10 years now, and in that time, I've settled on 2 firm rules when it comes to my players and character creation. Number 1, their characters conceptually have to make sense in the world that we're playing in. And 2, the character has to have a reason to join an adventuring party. And in all my time as DM, I've only had to veto 1 character before this incident. So, onto the story. I've been running this campaign for about 6 months now, and things are going great. Unfortunately, due to scheduling issues, things started to not go so great. One player had to drop out due to getting put on the night shift at his job, and another had some family issues going on and missed some sessions semi-frequently. The usual stuff that derails campaigns in adult life. About this time, a new guy starts at my job. One day, he sees me unbutton my work shirt and sees the D&D shirt I'm wearing underneath, and we start talking about D&D. I figure I'll take a chance and invite him to play since we're down a few players. He accepts. I send him a few of the Google Docs I have with campaign setting stuff on them. I run a homebrew campaign and let him know he can read through them if he wishes, or when we sit down to create his character, I can point him directly to what information is relevant to his character. To my pleasant surprise, he reads everything and even asks me multiple questions over the next few days. We finally sat down one night to hammer out the finer details of his character over Discord, and he has already worked out most of it. He wanted to play a variant human fighter, Eldritch Knight subclass. The idea is that he was born with a magical birthmark that has made him an outcast. Big deal in my world, as there's a huge bias against magic. And he left his home to find answers about his mark and to try to learn how to control his powers. So far, so good. There's only a few minor, small things to work out to really make this character meld into the world. And finally, I got to the big question. What would your character's motivation be for joining the party, and why would he want to stay with them? A few seconds of silence go by and he answers, "My character wouldn't join the party." I hesitate for a second before asking what he means. "Well, my character is just used to being a loner, and he doesn't trust people. He'd be very unlikely to join a group, and even more likely to stay with them for an extended period of time." I tried to suggest a few ideas that would get his character on board with joining a party, from needing money to needing more manpower to get the answers he needs to being tired of being alone, but he just vetoed everything I suggested. Finally, after what seemed like forever, it was probably only like 10 minutes, but still, I finally gave up on trying and said, "Well, it sounds like this character isn't going to work in this campaign. You can either give him a reason to join the party, or you can create a new character." "So you're just going to railroad me into doing what you want? If that's the case, I'd rather just not play." "Well, I guess that's your decision. He left the Discord server shortly after and has avoided me at work ever since. We've since filled the empty slot with one of my players' wife, and she's doing an amazing job. Oh, a few things to add. For the sake of keeping this post as brief as possible, I didn't really go into detail as to what I meant by the character has to have a reason to join an adventuring party. Honestly, the answer to this question could be as simple or as complex as the player wants, as long as they're willing to be part of a team. I've had players with simple motivations like, we've been going through some stuff together and now we're friends. And I've had players with reasons intricately laced into multiple page backstories. It doesn't matter what the reason is, as long as it gets the character to stick. Also, this guy refused to come up with a reason why his character would work with the party under any circumstances. And two, I actually really like edgy backstories. As long as the player can keep the character motivated to stay in the party, they can work quite well. It's unfortunate he couldn't because the character he pitched me sounded awesome. And also three, guys named Kyle have left a negative impression on some of y'all. Just kind of funny to see. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's a thing. But anyway, everything the DM said right there is really, really good. And the DM doesn't need to justify requiring a player to join the party at all. I honestly struggle to come up with a character who wouldn't want to join a party working in a D&D game. Obviously, there are definitely going to be characters that hesitate to join the party. That's totally reasonable. If you remember back to Critical Role Campaign 2, Caleb and Not, while they were a duo, they didn't really want to join the rest of the Mighty Nine for a bit. They were kind of on the fence about it. In fact, all of the Mighty Nine to a degree were on the fence about joining the group, and that's okay. But eventually, they joined the group, because that's what the rules are. You have to do that eventually, because otherwise you're not going to be able to play the game, because you will be away from the rest of the players, and the DM won't be able to focus on you, and frankly, that's not worth it. There is also the distinct possibility that our problem player here understands the issues for both the DM and the party, but just doesn't care, and this is an early warning sign of main character syndrome, a person who wants to have their own story regardless of how it affects the rest of the group. And that, well, that is something you cannot tolerate. This story happened about a decade ago. At the time, I was about a year into running a weekly high-realism GURPS game in a homebrew fantasy world. The game was about running a mercenary company, but with a strong emphasis on things like economics, logistics, and long healing times. This was the sort of game where a lot of fights were decided before they even started, based on positioning and tactics. One of the players contacts me and lets me know that he knew somebody who'd be interested in joining. We had room for another, so I said sure. We'll call the new player John, not his actual name, by the way. When John arrived, I found out that the two of them didn't actually know each other. John had just seen my player reading a GURPS book at a bus stop and I guess came up to him to ask if he knew a game John could join. During character creation, I went through campaign and setting information, which included a brief mention of which species could have children with each other in case he wanted to play a mixed species character. When I did that, he immediately asked, "Oh, so is your game like about breeding them?" Maybe this should have been my first red flag, but I could see where the misunderstanding was, so I clarified and moved on. He chose to play a member of a mercenary order who held a specific oath never to kill someone except when acting on someone else's orders. Not sure why he chose that given what happened next. So he gets hired by the company and dropped into the current story, which involves trying to track down one of their own who's been captured. We'll call her Eliza. The party's gathering information in a local town, making sure to tip well because they don't want to develop a reputation as a looting army. When he walks up to the boss of the company, who just hired him, he goes, "Permission to kill the stable boy?" The boss, who's another player character, goes, why? And John says that then they can take their horses and go faster. The boss clarifies that the party already has horses and that John is not under any circumstances allowed to kill any civilians in the town. Okay, at this point I take him aside and explain that that is not the sort of game that we're playing and that he can't just murder people without consequences. He told me he understood and we went back to the game. The party went to an old allied NPC of theirs, Leaf, who they knew could magically track people and hired them to help. He used Eliza's name in an incantation and told the party that it wasn't working for some reason. At this point, one of the other player characters, who was Eliza's brother, revealed that Eliza wasn't actually her name, but she was using fake names to escape some people from her past. He told Leaf, and only Leaf, her name, and Leaf used it to successfully track her down. Sometime later, the party has now rescued Eliza and paid Leaf, and Leaf is going on his way. When John speaks up, "I shoot Leaf in the back with my bow. I already had it drawn." Now, this is both a violation of his oath and makes no sense. Like, in addition to it just being out of left field, he had just joined the party, and Leaf is an old friend of theirs. They would definitely side with Leaf over him, and he's like surrounded by them. His character's gonna die, pretty much guaranteed. So I pause the game, explain all of this to him, and ask why he's attacking Leaf. He stated that Leaf knows Eliza's real name now, so he's protecting his party. Eliza's player calls BS and points out that Leaf just saved her life. He insists that he's already said he's doing it and will not take it back. So I let him make the roll. He hits, almost but not quite managing to kill Leaf. Then the party promptly captures him, court-martials him, and the company boss executes him. He was not invited back for another session. After some discussion, the group decides to just roll with these events. Leaf spends the next month of game time recovering from his injuries on the company's dime, and it takes quite a bit of work to repair their relationship. Usually with these out-of-game situations, I would recommend a retcon, but here we can see a party that took a bad situation and made it into a good storytelling moment, which is really good to see. I also like that the DM did not give this guy many chances, and each and every time this guy showed a red flag, the DM pulled him aside to talk about it. Out-of-game talk to solve an out-of-game problem. The out-of-game problem being this guy's abhorrent behavior. Honestly, I've got no notes. With a really unself-aware instigator, this is a really good case study on how to handle it. You give him some chances. You talk to him out of game. You explain how the game plays. You give a session 0 to establish expectations, and when it doesn't work out, and they waste your goodwill, get them the hell out of your group. Overall, hell yeah. I had a player who played in a couple of campaigns. He was known to be a rules lawyer and was a bit of a pain to start, though I was relatively new to running games, and he was reliable and local, which is a big plus when you live in a relatively rural area with a small pool of players. When we first got started, he would challenge me on rules mid-game. To keep things going, we defaulted to rule 0 after some pushback, and every game was followed by 1 to 2 page single-space emails detailing the areas where he disagreed with my decisions. A few times, I did not retcon, but made clarified rulings for how things would proceed if it seemed like I made an incorrect call at the table. The vast majority of the time, it boiled down to, this is the way we're doing it in my games, sorry if you disagree, and feel free to run a game by your rules, I'll even join as a player. We started a long-running campaign in a crazy homebrewed world during the heyday of D&D 3.5. There were 6 players, I allowed some third-party content, so everyone had slightly overpowered characters. Rarely do a group of players complain if they have too many strong abilities after all, and it was mostly a fun game. It didn't stop the long post-game emails, and they continued to get longer every week, from Mr. Rules Lawyer, of course, finally topping out at 4+ pages after every game session. We had played the campaign from level 1 up to level 12 over more than a year when they decided to try to rob the very well-protected vaults belonging to a lich. It was known this place was heavily trapped, and of course, the one gap the group had struggled with the entire time was not having a rogue. They came up with inventive ways of finding / triggering / dodging traps. I was fine with this. After the umpteenth trap in this particular session, they had located yet another magical trap. The rest of the party retreated 60 feet around the corner with the intention of sending in a summoned minion to trigger it. Mr. Rules Lawyer mocked the rest of the group for their cowardice and explicitly stated, "These traps always have a radius of 30 feet. I'm going to stand 31 feet away from the trap and watch it go off." This particular trap happened to be a circle of death, which in 3.5 had a radius of 35 feet. I was doing my best to keep the devilish DM grin off my face, particularly because this was the 3rd time they had found one of these, and I knew he was making a potentially fatal mistake with his character. The trap was triggered, the spell went off to the full radius, and Mr. Rules Lawyer rolled a nat 1 on his saving throw. Immediate character death results. First he whines that it isn't fair, then he suggested that I lied about the radius. After looking up the spell, he then accused me of changing the trap type after he declared where he was standing. So I showed the whole group my notes and the trap map for everything they had covered. I had written it all up in Word and printed out the notes, so it wasn't like I could easily change them with my pencil at the table. The group rested, and the rogue prepared a reincarnate to bring Mr. Rules Lawyer's character back from the grave, since he was a cleric. Rolling on the chart for the random reincarnation race, it was going to turn Mr. Rules Lawyer's character into a human, which really isn't that bad, even if it was going to change up his stats a little bit. And they were getting high enough that with some effort and a side quest, they could actually get his original race back. Instead, however, Mr. Rules Lawyer said his character would be offended to come back as a human, and would never do so. that the character's soul would rather stay dead. I asked to confirm. The other players told him to stop being so dramatic. He insisted on this. I stated, the reincarnation fails because character's soul declines to come back. The body dissolves into ash, and she is permanently dead. Mr. Rule's lawyer then threw a bit of a fit about being permanently dead, but I didn't budge. He chose death for his character over inconvenience, and I wasn't going to let that slide. I was happy to have him roll up a new player character, especially since the Lich had an entire area devoted to unique specimens coming up. It was the perfect place for the party to find his new player character and get back into the game. That night, I received a 6-page diatribe after the game. Mr. Rule's lawyer's final ultimatum was that I should allow his character to come back as a ghost, which can possess the body of other characters, both player characters and non-player characters with no saving throw. While possessing a body, the ghost gets to keep all of his mental stats and character/class abilities while gaining the body's physical stats and racial abilities. This possession has no time limit or way to end it, other than when I find a more suitable host, I'll just move on. This was clearly a broken ability, and no sane DM would give this power to any player character, or even non-player character. No saving throw versus indefinite possession? No way, no how. I declined. He insisted he was never coming back, which I confirmed was correct, and then permanently disinvited him from this and all future campaigns with me. I printed the entire exchange to share with the other players so they would know why I did this, and they were amazed I had put up with the emails for this long, since they had no idea it was going on at all. After all was said and done, I discovered just how much extra stress those emails had added to my life, and actually felt rejuvenated and more excited to continue with the campaign. It was also a very valuable lesson in drawing boundaries with my players, and now I cut off any of this behavior quite early. I don't mind if people disagree with my rulings, and I'm happy to discuss it with players so we're all in agreement on how to go forward, but someone questioning all of my decisions as a GM is clearly a bad fit and should not be in my groups. I give this advice to any other GMs and offer up this horror story as a reason you should not be afraid to set solid boundaries, even when you're new to running games. In social activities like Dungeons & Dragons, setting boundaries is really important. We've established this many times, but many times we're talking about more serious boundaries. Things like past trauma, and those boundaries are also very, very important, but there are such things as simpler boundaries that everyone needs to have. Look, I agree with the DM. I am an advocate for players being able to express what they want out of the game, and if they want more rules communication, then this is great. However, 6-page essays, maybe not the best way to communicate it. It's just, it's almost as bad as just screaming at the DM in person at the table. They're both just really stress-inducing. Look, I'm a DM with tons of homebrew rules, and I'm running a game for a new party who haven't experienced those homebrew rules before, and therefore I have a player who messages me frequently during games to check on rule stuff because often I change the rules on my own accord. And you know what? That's perfectly okay with me because the player is just respectfully sending me a little push. They're not sending me an essay, they aren't yelling at me, they're just asking questions, and that is perfectly okay. In fact, it's healthy for the game. I've learned a lot from this player. However, I don't think being a rules lawyer is the biggest problem this player is presenting us with, because holy hell, the reaction of that player character death, I get it, player character death isn't fun, but the way this guy reacted, not great, and a sign of much bigger issues at hand. To preface this a bit, I want to give the following information. This is the best group I've ever played with. A lot of us are game masters in our own right, and we regularly trade the DM screen around. Not everyone is an expert at every system we play, and so while game master decisions that I disagreed with enabled the situation in part, I do not put this at their feet. This is a roleplay decision that I do not agree with, and my reaction here is key. I play a lot of Call of Cthulhu, but my favorite group I play with is the one I see weekly. I drive an hour plus traffic in order to play, and regularly sing this group's praises for their roleplay online. Key figures here are me, the window washer, the soldier, the geologist, the GM, and the bird watcher. My issue here is not that my character died, that's a common event in Call of Cthulhu, but how they died. We had just released an interdimensional irregularity and saved the world. An unfortunate side effect of this was a large explosion that took out a couple of the player characters, including the bird watcher. I had scrambled up the hole left behind by the irregularity soon after he had left, before the explosion. The explosion then prompted the other player characters nearby to also clamber up the hole after me. They were soon after joined by a fast-moving monster. As the GM described it, the three of us were deposited at the end of the hole, soon followed by the monster that began to peek out the top of the hole. No characters were under the influence of sanity conditions at the time. My character was running away from the monster and the previously explored monster lair, and so took off in the vague direction of civilization. The geologist failed a constitution saving roll and further succumbed to an illness that was taking him. At this point, the birdwatcher out of the game decided to tell the soldier to shoot me in order to then eat me later, which he did. Knowing the birdwatcher, he would think it would be fun, but as evidenced by this post, I felt quite the contrary. Okay, hold on. Hold your horses just for a minute. I get that the PvP thing sucks, and I agree. But are we just gonna skip over the fact that they wanted the player to eat this guy? Like, is cannibalism an established thing? Is this some kind of TikTok trend I'm uninformed of? What the Seemingly everyone was fine with my character just dying instantly from the shot, but I insisted on him actually rolling to shoot and then rolling damage when he hit. I believe the fact it was at the end of the session and the scenario that made people more amiable to the idea, but nonetheless, I was not okay with just deleting my character like that. The decision upset me for a handful of reasons. 1. The soldier had no reason to fire upon me, an ally. 2. Even if there was cause to fire upon me, surely that is a lesser priority than either the monster currently peeking out the hole, though starting to head back into the hole at this point, or the ill comrade standing next to him. 3. This wasn't even the soldier's idea. 4. The soldier got a bonus die to hit, Call of Cthulhu's version of advantage, despite me being a moving target that really should have got a head start on everyone involved. 5. This feels like a betrayal from the group, which I love playing with so much. Ultimately, the character was going to die anyway, one way or another, but I feel cheated having another player kill me for no reason in this manner. I also recognize that this is a game, and it doesn't really matter, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm feeling these emotions. Thanks for being a place to vent. I do feel much better. Yeah, I get that this player still respects his fellow dungeon masters and everything, but yeah, no, this isn't it. This is not it at all. Okay, blatant out-of-character metagaming for starters, with the birdwatcher initiating this whole event while being a dead character. Not cool, not okay. On top of that, the soldier has seemingly no RP justification for this. On top of that, PvP needs to be an established part of the game, and that's not clarified here, so I'm going to assume it's not an established part of the game, especially since our OP seems to be very surprised that this even went down in the first place. On top of all that, the Dungeon Master gave the soldier the equivalent of advantage, basically cheering him on and killing a fellow player character for no reason. Look, unless the OP gave the clarification of, oh, these are good game masters, I promise, guys, I would just assume they're really bad at their jobs based on this post. This is very, very unflattering. Look, all of this stuff could be okay in some games, but here it just comes off as end-of-campaign shenanigans that happen to screw over another person and kill their character, which, I'm sorry, in the vast majority of games, in all of the games I've played, that would be completely unacceptable, and yeah, I would be salty too. I don't want to pass harsh judgments in contradiction to the OP's claims, but damn, I do not think I would like playing with these people. Alright, and that's today's episode of RPG Horror Story. Sorry if I sound a bit fuzzy in some areas. I just had surgery and my mouth is kind of weird right now. But anyway, if you guys enjoyed it, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out my Tabletop Tavern Tip series where I give advice to both DMs and players, old and new. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. They ate him? To let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.